All right. So, welcome back to another episode of Human on the Daily. I am so excited for today's guest, Vanessa and I think we met through Powerhouse Women. I honestly can't actually remember at this point how we really got connected. But you've been such a light in my life recently, and Vanessa is someone who's just so just such a light. You're just such a magnetic human, and you see so much in other people around you, and I feel like you're the kind of person that's like the catalyst for someone else to see their potential and really believe in themselves. So I'm so excited to have you on and be able to show the world how amazing you are. So welcome.
Oh my gosh, thank you. What a way to be introduced and brought into this conversation. I appreciate you so much. And you know what's crazy? I think like the universe brought us together because I'm not entirely sure either, but I think we knew so many mutual people and we ended up being in each other's spaces so much and we magnetized.
Mhm.
But that introduction, honestly, when people ask me my definition of success, it's being able to help others be successful, like being in the position
Mhm.
that I'm so abundant that I get to help other people be successful. So saying that I help others kind of see their light is just, I just feel like so grateful to hear that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's really is so true. Like, I love when we get together and just do our coffee chats. And so yeah, I'm just so excited to have this conversation. And because I love not only everything you're doing, which we'll get into, and everything that's coming down the pipeline, but I also we connected on so many different things. Like, yes, we connected on the ADHD Enneagram stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into that and how we both find it to be like superpowers. But I think something that we didn't even realize that we shared in common right off the bat was coming from relatively unexpected backgrounds. Like, I think people look at us as we are now as and they don't expect like me to come from mathematics, and they don't expect you to come from finance, and just these pivots we have made, massive left turn pivots, and just kind of flow into whatever we feel called to. And I think that is such a superpower that we share. Like, now I'm recognizing and I'm being able to hold the space that is a superpower. And so
Yes.
I would love just to talk a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and then I do want you to kind of merge in there how you've broken the mold of the expectations that people put on you.
Yeah. I mean, to what you were just saying, if you think about history, like all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, how jobs were viewed and how a lot of what was honored was staying where you were
Mhm.
forever. Like
Yeah,
that was
you
success.
go to work for for some reason the power company comes to mind, and you
Right.
go work for this one
Corporate.
company until you build up a retirement in your 60s.
Right. And so that was viewed as success. So to want to kind of fight against that ideal of you get a job, you stay there, you work your way up, and to accept that there's a pivot, accept that I need to be fulfilled as well and not just do what's expected. So I do think it is a superpower to welcome the pivots in your life and not be pushed to a track that doesn't align just because
Mm-hmm.
it looks good on the outside or that's what's expected in your
Yeah.
family, you know. So I think more and more it's accepted. It's very accepted. In fact, it's like, you know, celebrated to do those pivots now. But I definitely agree. We come from that. It's like we have these past lives, and mine was in finance. I actually have an educational background in interpersonal communication. So communications with a focus on interpersonal and sociology. So I've always been more of like a communication person, an interpersonal person. Like I've always really valued like that empathy side of myself, empathetic side, and being able to connect to people. But what's interesting is people always ask me or my parents and my parents' friends, like, well, what are you going to do with that? I always like, because I really I enjoy being unexpected. I always said, I'm going to have healthy relationships. I'm going to communicate in healthy ways. Like, what more could you want from life? You know, you can use that no matter what you do. But as I graduated, it was kind of like, you know, what do I wanted? I wanted to be in fashion. And so I got an internship, not in fashion, but I got an internship in a wealth management office through my boyfriend, who's now my husband. But at the time, he was working in that office and he got me an internship. And I ended up down this path in finance, not fashion, even though fashion was more my passion. And I worked with an incredible team, and I was there for 11 years, and I got to do some amazing things. I got to learn so much about IPO placement and just investments and the stock market. And I was a registered stockbroker. I registered all the way up to the point where I was going to become branch manager at some point.
Oh, wow.
And it was at that point where I had just had my kids. And I felt like what I was doing is I was unfulfilled totally. So I was just trying to like climb the ladder to do like the next thing to feel more fulfilled.
Yeah.
Have you ever done this?
Try to figure 100%. And it's something that I talk with so many people about, like the clinicians that I work with, and now with females in like the newer mindset space, and just like the grasping that we do. And we're like, I'm unfulfilled, and I can recognize I'm unfulfilled, but I don't know like what's wrong. And you still kind of get stuck in the shoulds. And so you're like, okay, well, I guess like that everyone's telling me like, keep going up the ladder. Like that will help me feel fulfilled. So I'm just going to keep doing that. And or like get the next certification or get this no, like you almost need to like take a step back and figure out really what is underneath.
Right.
And you versus someone else.
Right. And you totally hit the nail on the head, because it's more on the surface where you're like, well, I'll be fulfilled if I have more money, because that's like the way I was brought up, is like money, you know, have money, you know, and then it's, you know, I'll be fulfilled if I have a better title, if I look better on the outside, right? It's like a high performing issue, you know, perfectionist issue. But you hit the nail on the head, is that's more surface. But if you look underneath, I started to say like, but why are those things important? And I realized that is actually coming from a place of lack, where I fear not having enough money, or I was making decisions based on the fear of being disappointing and to my parents, and the fear of not having enough money, and these coming from these places of lack. So if I'm going to make decisions coming from a place of abundance, of, you know, where my gut is, I realized I needed to pivot. And I felt so called to social media. I felt so called to like this massive growing thing where you could connect with people across the world. And all of a sudden, this dream of being in fashion, where it's like you had to be in New York or you had to be in Paris, you know, to be in this industry, all of a sudden it was at my doorstep. Like it was in my hands with social media. I didn't have to be anywhere. So I was able to just start this social media side of things, where I grew a blog and I started just connect with people everywhere who are just, you know, like-minded and looking to connect. And it was such a beautiful thing, truly. And I was, you know, pulled in a lot of directions in the beginning. I was in finance still. I went to 3 days a week. When I finally figured out, okay, wait, this isn't there. I actually was going to become branch manager. And instead I told my team, hold on, I think I want to work part-time instead. So I literally like pivoted so hard, 180. And so I was working 3 days a week or 2 days a week. I'm sorry. I was working 2 days a week. And then I was home with my kids 3 days a week. They were babies at the time. And I was growing my blog at the same time. So I was like pulled I was definitely feeling the stress. That was one of the most demanding times in my life. And I remember thinking like, something's got to give. And I hope it's not me. I hope I like survive this.
Yeah.
Like I know what I want and I just have to stick it out. And it's like when I felt like I was just gonna break, you know, how they say it's so true. It's like just go one more day because you know, just persevere, because as soon as I was like, I'm just not sure I could keep going, that's when I finally hit my goals for income as a blogger. And I was able to leave finance and wealth management completely and just take off on that full time
Yeah.
and be home and more flexible with my family full time. And so it was just all the things people tell you, like just
Mhm.
persevere, because it's like you never know if it's that next day where that corner will turn,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I just picture like all the images you see in like memes or social media posts where it's like this like hard ass climb and it's just like that little peak that you need to get over to see the like vastness that's coming.
Yes, yes. And it was such a new thing. And it was still pretty new. Again, it's typical. I thought I was late to the party. But that was 2000, let me think about this, 15. I thought I was late to the party and I was walking in while things were still growing and exploding.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still growing and exploding, but just in different ways.
Hmm.
So it was it's always very cool to look back on it.
Yeah.
Everything in retrospect becomes so clear.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020. And I'm curious too, because I know that there's probably a lot of people listening that are like, ooh, like I have this passion that I actually like I've kind of let go of because I followed the shoulds. And I do think, for sure, as I think what you said about like recognizing when something is coming from a lack and being able to like reframe and realize that that's not the most, like, that's not empowering. So
Right.
it's probably like that's something to kind of get curious about. So I definitely like want to, like, I guess, put a little bit more of a light on that because I think that was so brilliant to say.
Mhm.
And I know that there's also a fear around the judgment that comes with change or pivot, particularly in a space where people may not understand what you're doing,
Mhm.
like social media or like building a new app or like
Mhm.
all these different things. So what do you have to say for as like what did you come up against? How did you kind of work through it? Or what advice would you give for someone who has that fear?
Well, full transparency, I felt so much shame being a fashion blogger. There is so much stigma on like fashion bloggers and how they show up and what they do. And I used to kind of hide it. And if people said, well, you know, if I was asked, what do you do? I would say I'm in social media, you know, and I remember going on it was like a work trip with my husband. And a lot of the C-level team got together and had dinner together. And I was at the table and someone asked me what I did and wanted to kind of talk about it. And so I shared how yes, I'm in fashion blogging, and I shared a little about what I do. And I remember going back to the hotel room and telling my husband, I said, I feel so embarrassed because I'm sitting at this table with like a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, and a CPA, and like all these brilliant people. And it's like they're asking me about what I do, and they were being very kind and respectful. It's not anything from them that made me
Mhm.
feel that way. It was from me
Yeah.
feeling that way, feeling like shame and not good enough. And I remember he looked at me and he goes, they know nothing. They know what they do, but they don't know anything about what you do. Maybe they look at you and feel the same way. Maybe they look at you
Mhm.
and say, like, I don't know anything about fashion blogging. That's so crazy. Like I've heard of it or I've read about it, but like I don't know anyone that does it. Maybe they're intimidated of you. He's like, you have to
Yeah.
flip your mindset a little bit and just having that perspective and realizing that um like we're all curious and we're all coming from a good place, and if
Mhm.
people aren't, that is that's for them
Yeah.
to deal with, right?
But yes, exactly. Like the projections, like if anyone
Right,
were shaming you, it is a projection of something in them. Like
right.
there's so many different ways that could be, but it's always going to be on them, not on you. And I think it's important, like taking that accountability and recognizing when you're putting it or projecting it from yourself.
Right. I was
Because
putting that
it
shame on
really is like,
myself.
what is your definition of success? If yours is being able to connect and do all these things, you were making your version of success a reality. Versus
Mhm.
if you were the corporate lawyer, that would not complete your idea of success. It might be for them.
Right.
And to your husband's point, like I remember, let's see, 2015, I was a year into being a doctor of physical therapy and being a corporate clinician. And I can guarantee, because I remember distinctly, if someone asked me what, like if anything was possible, if you could do any career at all right now, like I might have wanted to keep in the healthcare fitness space, but I would want my primary income to be from travel blogging. Like I remember distinctly thinking that
Travel blog,
and
yes.
being incredibly fucking embarrassed to say it.
Yeah. And it's like, why, even if there is that stigma, why does it need to be? It's not I haven't created that stigma. I'm
Yeah.
not, you create your own reality, and if you have a healthy relationship with what you do, then
Mhm.
like you said, I project it onto myself. So like having a healthy relationship with what I do, having pride and being proud of how hard I work, even if that's not what other people see,
Mhm.
just really letting myself feel good in what I do, then I project that, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't really have to take on other people's projections of if they don't respect what I do.
Yeah. And the more that you lean into your truth, what you want to do, it will inevitably give permission to so many others to do whatever they
Yes.
want to do, no matter what it is.
Yes, that is like such a huge point. That is such a huge point. Is that like if you take those steps with some courage and bravery, you've no idea how many people are like, oh, well, if she can do it, like
Yeah. Shows
maybe
people what's
I
possible.
can take the first baby step. Like that doesn't seem
Yeah.
so scary or so hard. And I can't even tell
Mhm.
you, I've met quite a few people who are like, well, like you kind of inspired me. Like I saw you doing it and I thought like, oh, I could, do something like that and share my voice. And it is truly, to me, again, that's success. And then on a different level with my kids, I never really realized how much they've been watching until more recently, where they are, better at expressing themselves and what is meaningful to them. And I have to share something I have not shared yet. But I was having a rough week recently with my entrepreneurial journey, and I saw this fan account was started. It was called like the F word fans, because the app I'm developing is the F word. And I didn't know who created it, but I didn't know what to think, but it was an account that started posting these really inspirational things about the F word, and it was supporting me. And I didn't know, I just kind of didn't pay too much attention, but I was touched, but I didn't know who created that account. And I was like just laying next to my daughter, talking to her before bed one night, and she was like, I that F word fans account? And I was like, yeah. She goes, I made that. And I was like,
Oh,
you did? And she said, yeah, I knew you. I saw you and I know how hard you work. And I saw, you struggling a little bit. And I wanted you to feel that like you are, supported. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So
oh,
they're watching and they're seeing like the kids are watching you and they're seeing
mhm,
you take these courageous hard steps, and it kind of helps them see like, oh, I can do that too and I won't die, or
mhm.
nothing's going to blow up, right? I can
Yeah,
take this hard step and nothing's gonna blow up. So I think it's like helping them by example in so many ways
100%. Yeah,
live
I
out
mean,
their
that's such a
magic.
beautiful example to show to your kids. And like we talked about earlier, it's not even just, it's also allowing them to kind of redefine what success means for them instead of following, like you and I talked about, like what success was modeled to us or what we were taught
Yes.
it had to be. And it was all like money and title and status and like that versus it, you're doing, which is teach your children, the next generation, that like, no, it's how you like leave people feeling like, who can
Yeah.
you inspire? How can you lift other people up?
Right. And that is, you're right. The definition of success has evolved, just like our definition of like a career and pivoting has evolved so
Mhm.
much. And it's so much more fulfilling, and it's so much healthier in so many ways.
Yeah.
To accept ourselves as human and like a more human version or definition of success.
Yes, exactly. Which is, I mean, hell, it's part of why I started this podcast. Like, it's called Human on the Daily, and it's all about
Yes.
breaking out of the expectations of
Yes.
others because I feel like it's so important for to lead with your humanness first.
Yes. It's
There's
so powerful. And I mean, I joke a little bit because with AI and everything, every time I do like a slip up or something, if I'm like not perfect or whatever, someone brings it to me, I'm like, well, I'm just proving I'm not AI, you know?
yeah,
That is super special as I am human. And that is
yeah,
like pretty amazing, especially as AI is taking over in so many ways.
yeah,
Like being human is having mistakes and these special human nature things is so valuable.
yeah. Like, and actually, that's a perfect layup to like part of your humanness and something that we connected on is like being an Enneagram 7 and having ADHD and being like the squirrel brain. And so, how have you found that, like, the little bits of you that maybe you were like imperfections or whatever, like growing up, and now, like, how do you see them as superpowers?
Oh, that's such a good question. So with ADHD, I have found that I chase curiosity.
Mm.
And this totally aligns with what we were just talking about with like career paths and pivots. But what happens is I get so lit up with curiosity about certain things. And it's not necessarily about the accolade or the finishing or the finishing
Yeah.
of the project, right? Which can work against us ADHDers. But what it has helped me do is pave a super authentic path where I am connecting to what my intuition is connecting to. And
Mhm.
ultimately, like we bring our magic to the world by being our full selves and being completely ourselves, no matter what that's judged as or looked at. So no matter what that project is or what that curiosity that's lighting me up, I feel so drawn to it. And I've allowed it to be a guide in so many
Mhm.
ways. And it's allowed me to pay attention to what's actually important in a
Mm.
lot of ways. So redefining what success is, redefining what is important. And it's like maybe not that certificate of finishing, but in the middle, having the curiosity to start and realize maybe I'm meant to go down like a different path with this. And
Mhm.
it's like starting my fashion blog and just with social media and how it's evolved, becoming so curious about how it functions and how we connect and what is fulfilling for us and what feeds human beings on an innate level, and how
Mhm.
social media isn't really emulating that. So it's not really a connective engine. And like, there's just so much that lit me up. And it's like, do I continue down my fashion blogging path, or do I shift a bit and
Mhm.
say, I felt so called and so curious about evolving social media in a direction it should go, changing that trajectory versus like what I see happening. And it's that ADHD, Enneagram 7 generator. I'm a generator. It's like, that's my intuition leading me. And it has not failed me. So it has a really good track record. And everybody's intuition is like that. Everyone's intuition will lead you down. It will lead you down the path you're meant to go down, not the easy path. It's never going to be,
and it may not make any kind of sense either.
It's going to be, what's that?
So it might not make any kind of sense either.
No sense. There's probably not going to be people walking in front of you. They might not be paved. So that's going to be super hard because you have to have a lot of faith and trust in your intuition. But it will be the path that is the most fulfilling and that you connect to, and the path where you can bring your magic to the world.
Yes.
So I really feel like that's how the ADHD plays in.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree from my own experience and then watching you and other people who also have ADHD, and it's being able to more readily lean into that curiosity and almost like that impulsive action that comes with ADHD of just being like, let's just fuck around and find out. Like, what happens if I just kind of go down this path, versus someone else who's a little bit more driven by like checking the box on something or that completion. Because there actually is, like, there's research now on the neural pathways of ADHD and how most people's motivating factor is being able to get the dopamine hit when they complete the project. And ADHD just doesn't function that way. It's not the completion, it's the curiosity.
Yes. And that is so true. And when I heard that, I was like, that's it. That's exactly it.
I wish I had known that as a kid. It would have
Same.
made things a lot clearer.
Yeah.
But I do want to dive in then, because I am so excited for what you're creating. And we've alluded to the F word a couple times now. And I mean, honestly, social media needs to be disrupted. So I'm so glad that you did have this curiosity and that you followed it. And so kind of tell us a little bit more about, like, what the hell is the F word?
Yeah. So in about 2019, I feel like a lot of people were feeling this disconnection even before 2020 hit. It was like, the more you're on social media, the harder you felt it was to reach the people you were trying to reach. Especially as a creator, it was so tough to understand how my content was being dispersed and like who I was connecting with. And then it was very isolating. And then getting those messages that are like, I never see your account anymore. I never see your content anymore. Are you even on here? It's like, I saw so much of that going on. And then in 2020, seeing how these echo tunnels were implemented and how there was this crazy division that took place. And it was so painful in a time when everyone was already feeling physically isolated. We took to social media, which was is supposed to be connective. And instead, there are studies showing the more people were on social media, the more lonely they felt. And obviously that's super bad when you're already feeling isolated, you're physically isolated. So there was just so much going on in social media. And I was already deeply curious, and, I got the excitement deep in my gut of how clear it was to me on how it could be, how we could reformulate social media in a way where, sure, you can still have marketing, but there is full transparency on how you're reaching your audience, how users are consuming the content, having control over what is coming into your feed. Because also the content we consume, we don't technically, algorithms that are implemented give us that content. And they say it's like within the first 10 pieces of content that you consume when you open a social media app creates your reality. And that's a big responsibility for an algorithm to create people's realities. And we're talking too about like girls in high school who those posts make a big difference. We're as humans comparative. There's just so much that's coming into play. And I really think our realities on social media should align with our realities in real life.
Yeah.
And so the other part of that was I was thinking about myself, my demographic, and the women in my circle, and everyone is either pivoting or, trying to be a better mom or trying to learn more about your finances and invest. And I started to think about the subjects that were being brought up in my circles, and everywhere it was women trying to be more powerful in their lives, be more empower the women around them in their lives. And I thought, if the content you consume supports that, then imagine what a catalyst that would be versus like having this non-focused, just like throw up a content in front of you, which is nice sometimes when you're decompressing, but when you're actually trying to kill it in life and you can't organize your content and have that focus, then your energy is being diffused and sucked into that. So how can social media give us energy back? And with all those stepping stones, I ended up designing a new social media platform. And it's been a crazy experience because someone from a finance background and then a blogger background, I do not have coding and tech background, but I do have real experience in the industry, and I'm insanely passionate because I know if we were reformulated how we connect, that it would help so many different avenues. It would help with mental health. It would help people harmonize what they're consuming into their brains with their real life. And ultimately that helps them bring their magic to the world. So went through UX and UI and built this beautiful, amazing, fun platform out. It's called the F Word because when I was thinking about all the women in my life and the things where we want to be empowered and powerful in, they all start with F. So I was thinking about like finance and fashion and food and flights and fitness and foreplay. It's like all the things were F. So I was like, oh, the F word, So that's why it is that very interesting name. And now I've come to a point where it's time to fund because it's a heavy lift to build out a social media experience and it takes a lot of dollars. So that is the stage I'm in now.
Yeah. And how has that been? Because I know you and I have talked a little bit. So I'd love like a little transparency for the listeners to see like what the reality is for something like that as a female. Like what has been like the expectations, negative or positive, that you've come up against? Like how have you navigated this new realm?
So I've had a really wide range of experiences as of now with having meetings with prospective investors that are in different categories. So it's interesting because you go into it and there's angel investors and there's venture capital and there's venture studios and there's combinators and there's so many different avenues. And I've dabbled in each one and found one. I actually had this thought last night before I fell asleep that I've come a long way. And I've learned so much and I'm so proud of where I've gotten to because I think it's one of those things that just takes doing the dirty work, just doing it, right? Getting into those conversations and having to be ready for whatever question comes at you and whatever attitude comes at you. I've had more meetings than I like with people who are really committed to the negative side of social media because it makes them money.
Yeah.
And that's so disappointing on a cellular level for me, because I deeply believe it doesn't need to be that way. And I know it is hurting so many people. So having those conversations is tough, but then you get to know what you get to know the opposite point of view and be ready in that next meeting. You get to be ready and say, it's so enlightening in so many ways to hear these completely opposing point of view. So maybe they're not going to be your investor, but they definitely became a source of information and power. So I'm getting into like details, but it's tough as a woman, because especially in the tech industry, it's very predominantly men. It's mostly men. And I have had a range of experiences with like amazing conversations, super inspiring, and some who were condescending. And
they like saw you and just put an immediate expectation on and just,
right. And I had a very similar experience in finance. Probably more so in finance, where it was condescending, because I was a lot younger too. So there was this, it was like my age and that I was a woman. But the numbers don't lie. And the numbers are that 1.9% of funding goes to women, even less to women of color. They just came out with a new study that when you pitching, women have to spend over twice as much time in their decks explaining to investors than men. So not only are we spending twice as much time pitching and explaining, we are getting 1.9% of funding. So think about time wise, how difficult that's difficult, right?
Yeah. I think that speaks to like what you're talking about earlier, is like the just one more day and keep going, because like that speaks to the like how many no's you are going to have to hear.
Yes.
And that's so many lessons in resiliency and getting, like you said, like there's all of those no's, like you can see them as a failure, or you can see them for what they are, with more information and more lessons to be able to grow stronger from.
It's so true. It's like getting to know no is a good thing. Is very interesting, because like the sooner I can get that no, the sooner I can get closer to where I need to be. And also when I started this journey, I knew there were parts of it that scared me to death. Like public speaking scared me. I knew pitching was going to be so intimidating, because I was going to have to face the parts of me where I felt like, again, I wasn't good enough to be sitting in that chair in that room. And so my word for this year was limitless, because I know the only limits I experience, I put on myself. I mean, in life, we are limited only by our fears and the things that we put on ourselves. And so it's been very exciting and cool, almost in a way, to get those no's and be like, that's not a limit for me.
Yeah. That's so important.
Are people not believing in it? That's still not a limit for me. None of that limits me to, I can keep going. I can do anything. And it's a very crazy mindset. But the minute I said, if public speaking limits me, I'm going to do it. It's amazing how empowering that is. If I could tell anyone to, like today, to do something, it's maybe write down the things that scare you a little bit or are stopping you from maybe taking that next step. And then think about ways to like squash it.
Yeah.
And, I'm listening to a book and she was like, you don't have to necessarily like face it head on. But like if it's, for example, if I'm going to use like a metaphor, it's like if you're scared of swimming, dangle your feet in the pool. You don't have to jump in, right? but desensitize yourself to it, right?
Yes.
So it's like,
We call
get
it
it.
graded exposure. Yeah. The like
Yeah.
the toe in and then the leg and then like,
Yeah. Right. And it's like, well, if I'm, with public speaking, I started to kind of analyze what's stopping me. And it was that wasn't as used to speaking, using my voice, being heard. So I thought, I'm just gonna get on my stories and talk more.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna talk more, and I'm gonna get more comfortable speaking in and being heard in general. And then I'm gonna put myself in rooms where there's circles who want to hear what I provide. I'm going to be on podcasts and I'm going to be heard. And it's, walking into what you originally thought you were afraid of. And it's so empowering.
Yes. Yeah. And I can mirror that entirely. So like, cause I mean, I'm now a podcast host for good. Like I have spoken on before audiences and I teach therapy. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would ever do any kind of public speaking, I would have freaked out and said, hell no. Like
Oh, really? I did not know this about you.
I was terrified of it, absolutely terrified of it. And I honestly kind of got like thrown into it just with being like a teaching assistant. And I like felt so confident that I was like, all right, I guess I have to figure this out. And I remember the first several times I went and spoke, like you could hear me speed up and like get shaky when I was up there speaking. And it was just getting reps in and having some people in my corner that were like, this stuff, like you've got this, like take a breath, trust yourself more. So I love the advice you gave of like just little things, kind of getting to the root of like, where's this fear coming from? It's from using my voice. Okay, how can I use my voice in a way that feels just a little bit outside of my comfort zone right now? Okay, what's the next thing? Then the next thing.
Right. You don't have to like jump in full-fledged if there's things that are steering you.
Now there are going to be people out there who do, like they do want to jump into the fire. Like I think of there's someone I love to follow on Instagram. It's like, the Instagram bestie that you're like, we're good friends, you just don't actually know me.
Yeah.
Like she's one of those for me. Her name's Chelsea Cowie. She's a free diver and a travel influencer. And she actually started free diving because she was terrified of darkness and open water and all the things that free diving entails. And she did just like dump and like literally dive into the deep end, quite literally.
Oh my God, literally. She was like, oh, I'm gonna physically do this.
Yeah. So I mean, there are gonna be people that's just how you function, like rip the Band-Aid off. But I do love the baby step approach. Like that's such a brilliant way to almost trick yourself into getting over a fear.
Right.
Like it's just a little bit at a time.
And I think life is, and the divine and God has magically built your life in that way if you let it move in that direction. Because I found that when I opened myself up to being heard, then I was invited to come speak. And so then I had the opportunity to speak. Yeah. And then with that, I felt so empowered, and I had a huge investor meeting a couple days later. And I was still on this high of like, I did this. So I got on that meeting and I had the opportunity to really just have the best meeting and feel so confident and speak from such a transparent and unique, like heartful place. Yeah. And then it led me into so many things that I was fearing, but I was walking into with confidence. Then I had, conversations with family that I was kind of more than shying away from. I was like putting off, which was causing stress with extended family. And I was like, wait, I can come in here and and all of a sudden it like opened up these doors, and it just shows how limitless we are when we address those things that are combining.
Yeah, I love the limit to this and the idea of like everything you're saying. Think of the idea of like there's so many times where we get into what if, and then everything that comes after what if is negative. Flipping it, and I feel like what you're doing with these like little things that are making you feel more empowered, has this giant ripple effect. It basically puts you in a position to just naturally be like, what if it works out? What if, and all the positive possibilities that come from there.
Yes.
Keeping it from work.
It is believing in the positive outcomes, because it didn't take, like, that first thing didn't take you down, right? Me starting to be hurt didn't take me out. So I'm like, okay. And speaking, which was amazing. It was the most wonderful experience. And I'm like, well, what if it turns out better to what we're saying? And it's like, well, what if I do take this meeting and it completely alters your reality in so many ways, where you're now taking on things that you once would have shied away from, and believe that you deserve the best outcome.
Yeah. No, I love that. And yeah, this whole like limitless thing, I love it so much. And I also know that that's so tied into the F Word app and people feeling more empowered in the content that they create and that they consume. So I'm for sure, like, everyone listening, it's going to be in the show notes. I'll have links for everything of how to connect with Venessa, the F Word app. And as we wrap up, so this show, again, it's called Human on the Daily. It's about like leading with your humanness. So what is something about you that people may not know?
I
can also tell you what you put on the sheet.
I remember what I put on the sheet, I think. And it's something that was on my mind, because I'm sure there's so many things people don't know. Even though I'm very like open-hearted on social media. But I think this is what I put on when we first were communicating them. And it's because it's been on my mind. I have scoliosis. And I remember reading about Usain Bolt, and he has scoliosis, and he like has two different length legs, because that's what happens when your spine's curved. And like physically and logically and scientifically, like, he is not meant to be a runner. You're not supposed to be a runner when you have scoliosis. It's like, if you have two different length legs, you cannot run as fast as someone with two full same length legs. It does not make sense. And he still was like, I believe I can be fast. I want to be a runner. And he put together like a plan, and he got doctors to help him figure out how to train so that it speaks to his body. And I mean, he's like the fastest man in the world, right? Yeah. And how illogical is that? Every person would have told him probably growing up, like, you cannot be a runner. You aren't built for this. And so, I mean, I have scoliosis, and it's something that like my whole life I probably felt was I don't have positive feelings towards. I had to wear a brace 18 hours a day when I was in junior high, and just a lot of struggle came from it. And I see it now as such a different point of view. But that's like one part of me those are the things I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah.
How illogical we can be. Do the things we're meant to do. So that's like a side story. But yes, a lot of people don't know that about me. What did I put anything else on there? That was it.
No, and I think that's such a beautiful point of like universe, source, God, like whatever you believe in, however you believe you came to be, like, it's just because you're meant, like it's almost like you have these things that are meant to get quote unquote in your way.
Yeah.
Because then you have to overcome them, and you're going to learn a lot from that. And you're going to be so much better at the thing that you're meant to do and inspiring others because of what you had to overcome.
It's so true. It's so true. And again, I keep going back to my word of limitless, because they look like, or sometimes we don't even realize they're there. They just feel a little stifling. It feels like I don't want to do this. And then when you realize that you can pretty easily, it frees up so much energy in your life. So
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, it's amazing.
So last question that everyone gets is, what is the one thing that has contributed the most to you being breaking free of expectations of others and leaning into your true authentic self?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is that I have this weird, I don't know what it is. It's just like a part of my personality and my psyche where I don't want to be on my deathbed and say, what if,
Yeah.
or I should have.
Hmm.
Like, I would rather fail a billion times than have that feeling like I'm out of time to try. Because
Yeah.
who knows where my mentality will be down the line. So like, if it comes to me now, like, life is so precious, and I
Hmm.
feel that deeply. And that is part of just like my personality, is that I always think like, I just don't want to be on my deathbed and think I could have tried harder, or I shouldn't have given up. So like, on these really hard days where it's like, oh, because we all have those days. And I just think like, I have to find out if I try one more day. Like, I just have to know, because I
Yeah.
don't want to think what if. So that's one
Yeah.
part. And it's just like
Like, don't let that moment where you end up sitting in your car by yourself
yeah,
crying be the end.
right.
We all
Because
have
like,
it.
what
Literally,
if?
we all
Because
have it.
you have it in you to like F around and find
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
And it really is persevering the F around
Yep.
and find out. So
Yes. And I
it's,
would argue, if you're not having those days where you're like in the car by
yeah.
yourself having random breakdowns, you're probably not dreaming big enough and going big enough into what you're meant to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if you're walking down those unpaved paths where other people might not understand you, you're going to be having those days where it's like,
Yeah. Like, what the actual F is
what am I
happening?
doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's partially that I am very lucky, and a day doesn't go by in my life where I don't recognize, like, I'm not grateful that I have like a super supportive partner, and that my husband, I feel in so many ways, has seen like my uniqueness and potential before I was truly able to accept it. When I was still kind of healing through things, he always like saw the best in me. And sometimes we need that
Oh,
influence in our life.
everyone needs
We
that.
always need that
Whether
influence
it's
in
a
our life.
partner or a friend or just
Right.
someone in your life that, like, on those hard days, because they're going to hit, but they can mirror back to you like, no, you've got this. Like, and I know you have the potential. So like, it's almost like we can borrow their belief in us when we don't have to
Right.
believe ourselves.
That's exactly it. Because I borrowed it. And there were days where I was like, I mean, the many days too, that were not many, but the days I struggle, I'm thinking about them. And through the years, there have been many days. And more recently, he's looked at me and just said, like, go bigger, double down, like,
Yeah.
take a bigger risk on yourself, like, show the world more. And it's like so crazy, because I see him as such a calculated person. He's not a 7. He is not I mean, he's so, calculated and well put together. And so to hear like, go bigger, like, show the world who you are. So to have that, yes, it's like borrowing that on those days where I feel like I can't. So I have that, and I'm very grateful every day for it. And so I'm trying to think of other things that have helped me. It's also in connection to the first part, this book I'm listening to, Becoming Bulletproof. She put it so well, just from like a different perspective. She said, there's been research that we all have regret in one way or another. It's either from doing something we wish we didn't, or it's from not doing something, right? So as it turns out, regret from doing something that we failed at, the pain of the regret diminishes over time. The regret of not doing something, the pain never goes away.
Yeah.
So I was like, so I love that so much, because it does align with the fact that I'm like, I don't want to be at a point where I say I should have, could have, or I should have found out if I could have.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. Like, that's such a good thing to like hold on to, like put it on a post-it note, throw it on the wall
Yeah.
for you to look at on those hard days where you're like, F it, like I give up, like I'm done, I can't anymore. And just remind yourself of like, but are you going to have the what if down the road? Because that's not what you want. So just keep
Yeah.
going.
And if you're like sitting there with the what if I fail, take that information and realize failing is less painful than not doing it at all.
Yeah. And there's
that,
always, like, it sounds woo-woo as all hell, but like there's
yeah,
always a lesson in failure. Like, I don't even like using the word failure because there's always
yeah,
something that we can learn or improve upon from it. It's an experience that adds to where we're going to go.
right. It's so true. It always opens a door.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or it shows us what door needed to be closed.
right. Oh, true, true.
Yeah.
But when you close a door, you make room
Yes.
eventually for another door to
100%.
open, right?
Yeah, you can't just keep adding. I talk about it all the time with people that I work with. Like, you need to create white space of some kind, like white space in your day, white space in your mind, in order to allow other things in.
It's so true. It's so true. This has been amazing.
Yeah,
keep
I feel like we could
seeing
talk for forever.
myself, and I'm like, why am I so red? Am I supposed to? I'm like, why am I so red in my?
On here. But
Huh?
anyways, it has been so wonderful chatting with you. I mean, I feel like we could talk for hours.
We could.
I
think
always
keep
feel
going
like
and
that
going
every
and
single time we
going.
grab for coffee. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna have all of the links in the show note. Y'all definitely check out the F Word, check out Venessa's stuff. She's amazing. You're gonna love her. And I cannot wait to see the F Word just completely transform social media for the better.
Oh,
So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is amazing.